There are legends that are forged by fire, and then there are lives that are forged by falling. One such legend is a mortal turned god, Atreus. Atreus was born beneath the shadow of a mountain that scraped the sky, Mount Targon, in a people whose lives were carved from wind, stone, and the discipline of war. The Rakor are a hard people, weathered faces, calloused hands, bodies that learn to carry storms. They do not sing for comfort, they sing to steal their breath before battle. To them, pain is a teacher, and endurance a religion. Atreus grew inside that religion, not the greatest among his kin, not the most gifted, but the one who simply refused to be broken. He stood up when others fell. He struck through exhaustion when others rested, and he walked away from defeat with the same look he'd had since childhood, ready to try again. Beside him, Pylas was both rival and brother. Where Atreus held steady, Pylas burned with hunger. Their fights were not hatred, they were practice, ritualized and necessary. Blood in the training circle, laughter after the fall. Both of them learning the same truth that every Rakor learns. Survival is not given, it is earned by repetition and pain. And above them both loomed Targon. Not simply a mountain, but a liturgy written in stone. To climb it was to court the stars. To reach the summit was to stand before a force older than kings and beg for something no mortal had a right to want. Many tried and died. Many returned but hollowed. The climb was not an ascent, it was a trial of the soul. Atreus climbed because he could not imagine another life. He climbed because the sun-bright constellations called him by name. He climbed because Pylas fell and Atreus could not bear to stop. At the peak, where winds tear at your throat and the heavens are close enough to burn, what waited was not mercy, but selection. The aspects are not kind. They do not reward virtue. They consume need. When the aspect of war descends, it does not ask if you deserve power. It takes what it wants. It took Atreus.
He did not wake to his life intact. He woke to a god walking inside his bones. Pantheon, the aspect of war, an immortal constellation given will. The moment of ascension was not a blessing, but an erasure. Atreus' self forced into corners of memory as the aspect wore his body like armor. For a time, the world knew only Pantheon, the spear that cast lightning into the sky, an avatar of tactical genius, brutality refined to a blade. When Pantheon moved, the earth trembled. When he spoke the languages of war, armies learned the shape of fear itself. This is where the story should have ended. A mortal chosen to become a god, a warrior made absolute. Instead, it bent. For inside Pantheon's perfect war mind, Atreus remained, a tiny ember in the ash. Memory is a stubborn thing. The smallest human thing can refuse to die. The taste of a childhood bread, the name of a laughing friend, the ache of a shoulder where a spear once struck. Atreus' ember kept glowing. It did not scream for power. It remembered faces. It flinched at the sight of needless cruelty. It held the quiet loyalty of a man who loved the people he fought for. That ember was a contradiction the aspect of war could not fully extinguish. The god who loved the shape of battle found himself irked by a human who loved people. And into that tension stepped Aatrox. To speak of Aatrox is to speak of a war that predates mortals, a being forged as a weapon and then hungered by the blood it spilled. The Darkin are a pollution of war, immortal blades that became monsters, and Aatrox is their fury made flesh. When the Darkin erupted on the world, they did not simply cut armies. They cut at the sky itself, trying to twist destiny into a blade. Pantheon answered the challenge, because that is how gods are made useful, by meeting gods with gods. The duel between Pantheon and Aatrox is not a clash of skill. It is a cosmic collision. Their fight rained starfire, mountains cracked. Armies on the plains below saw both like a storm and prayed. Aatrox was not a tactical opponent. He was raw, ancient malice, a thing that relished the art of destruction. And in the end, the old weapon did what weapons once did best. It cut into a god. Aatrox drove a blade through the heart of the aspect. With that one strike, constellations shifted, and a piece of the heavens ripped free. The aspect of war, that luminous, commanding presence, died. It should have been the end of everything. Pantheon fallen, the world stripped of another celestial caretaker. Instead, something stranger happened. When the aspect fell, it fell not as finality, but as release. The divine occupancy that had once swallowed Atreus loosened. A god's death can be a gift to its host. Inside the empty husk, Atreus gasped back to life.
He returned to the world not as a god, but as a broken man who had lain like a corpse beneath a ripped star. There was no chorus to greet him. There were no miracles left to hand him a golden crown. When Atreus opened his eyes, he tasted iron and dust, and for the first time, he felt the world's cruelty as a thing that bled him like any other mortal. If you think this would make a man collapse, comforted by the mercy of death, you don't know Rakor blood. He did not fall into despair. He took the shards. The instruments of the aspect, the spear that had struck the sky, the shield that had held back tidal armies. These relics remained, charred and humming like the last embers of a dying sun. Atreus could have laid down and let history decide his fate. He could have walked away into anonymity. Instead, he dragged himself upright, cradled the broken spear, and swore the kind of vow that changes the shape of a life. If the gods would abandon the people they used, then he would become what they were not: a defender who bled for the living. There is tragedy in that vow because it is both noble and impossibly lonely. Most men do not become legends by making vows in the dust. They become legends when a god blesses them. Atreus, however, became a legend because he refused the blessing and took the burden anyway. He learned the bitter truth that makes every mortal story more powerful than any god's. To choose is to own the consequences. The next years were an apprenticeship in pain and purpose. Atreus relearned what it meant to be human, to sleep without alarm, to feel cold, to mourn comrades died, and to drink bitter ale without seeking a message from the stars. He rebuilt the spear with human hands and methods, an act equal parts sacred and profane. Where the aspects had commanded loyalty through awe, Atreus earned it through example. He walked into villages where gods had done nothing and stood between raiders and the people who had no shelter but him. He hunted the Darkin not because he sought victory, but because the Darkin left nothing but wreckage in their wake. Where a god might have cared for balance, Atreus cared for the living. It is here the legend grows not in battlefield spectacle, but in small, stubborn moments. A shepherd whose flock was saved because a broken man returned. A child spared
because Atreus held the line. An old woman's hut that still stood because someone with no celestial right put himself between hunger and that doorway. These are the things gods forget, the cost of living. When you see Atreus verse after verse in the songs of Rakor, they do not sing of him as a god. They sing of him as a man who stayed. And yet the sky did not forgive. The aspects watched him with disapproval. They are not used to hosts deciding their own terms. Leona and Diana, the great faces of Targon's sunlight and moonlight, have their own quarrels and politics. The rebirth of a host who refused to be swallowed again made them uneasy. The Targonian hierarchy does not like rogues, even if the rogue still carries an echo of their power. But Atreus never wanted the heavens' blessing again. He wore his broken crown like a fist. If the stars would not fight for the living, he would. The old wound did not remain closed. Aatrox, the Darkin, lay wounded too. His blade had tasted god blood and found itself nicked and enraged. The two would meet again, not as blind fate, but as a calculated retribution. The second clash between Atreus and Aatrox is the part of the story that proves the whole point of his journey, that mortal determination can reclaim what the gods abandoned. Atreus did not defeat Aatrox by calling down the stars. He did it by doing the only thing aspects cannot truly replicate, by refusing to die. In that rematch, he reignited the constellation of war, not by a god's will, but by human insistence. He drove himself through pain and found in it a strength that no cosmic gift could match. He did not return the aspect to himself. He did not become Pantheon again in the old sense. He became something new, a mortal who could stand in the constellation's light because he had earned it, not because a god had placed it on him. What Atreus now represents, what Pantheon as a name comes to mean, is a paradox. On banners, he is a spear and a shield, an image of war made noble. In councils, he is an irritant, a reminder that the divine is not the only source of strength. To some, he is a savior. To others, an inconvenient symbol that the aspects are not indispensable. To himself, he is a man who knows both the terrible ease of divine power and the slow burn of human endurance. He knows the value of the scars that gods do not earn. There are threads in his life that make him one of the most human champions in all of Runeterra. He knows failure. He knows loss. He knows that the heavens are often cruel in their indifference. His mission is not the grandiose revenge of myth. It is steady and brutal and necessary. Hunt the Darkin, shield the weak, stand where gods refuse to stand. He has found companionship in unlikely forms, warriors who answer him with mutual respect, and quiet spirits who see in him the essence of stubborn survival. In the quiet hours, when dawn light slices over Rakor stone, you can imagine him lifting his battered spear, whispering to the fallen, "We stand, and we do not bow." The meaning of his life echoes beyond him. It is a lesson written in blood for anyone who looks up and asks whether the great forces of the world owe them anything. They do not, but they can still be defended. Gods may carve the sky into constellations and call it fate. Men can carve their own lines into the dirt and call it a promise. That promise is Pantheon's gift. When the songs are sung, they do not always speak of the duel that toppled a god. They sing of a man who would not leave a child to die. They sing of a hand that took a broken spear and kept on. They sing, ultimately, that power without responsibility is a hollow thing. and that responsibility chosen, not gifted, is a force even the heavens must reckon with. If the stars had been kinder, maybe the story ends different. Maybe Atreus would have become another puppet of an aspect, awe-inspiring, distant, and soon irrelevant to the people they were supposed to protect. But fate favored none of those tidy endings. The truth, the harder, more beautiful truth, is that a mortal can become larger than a god not by stealing its light, but by deciding what to do with the darkness once the light is gone. Atreus is Pantheon, but Pantheon is now Atreus' story. A fallen star reborn to fight for the living.